Good morning, DVC family. You're looking fabulous this morning, coming to meet with Jesus and just to learn and grow in faith. Right, so I'm just going to firstly say this is really difficult to write, and we're not writers, we're solar installers. So we really did our best to share our story as best we could. So I'm going to be reading. When preparing to share our journey, we visually likened our family to that of a little wooden rickety boat sailing through life's waters. So I thought the picture this morning was absolutely perfect. I saw a rickety boat because we reflect imperfection, constantly humbled by life's difficulties. Most certainly nothing special, but embedded in God's love, grace, united together for His eventual purpose and glory. I found myself searching beautiful paintings of such a powerful visual, that of a boat sailing through the waters. I must say, I'd realized the stormy seas represented God's majesty and power, yet the calm of the waters, His gentle love. As a family, we would experience both instances upon our journey together, and we would continue to do so.
So we thought we'd give a brief start from the very beginning of our marriage. Our journey started roughly in about 2012 when we got married. I must say, where to begin and what to share was truly a challenge. Our story resonates with many journeys alike. We have been most certainly blessed and an eclectic journey of retellability, I'd say. Married at 22, Charina, 23, me, we were told that we were far too young and we would not make it as a married couple.
We try to follow societal expectations. There were continual pressures and indications of how things should pan out, such as pressures and such as studying, get married, buy a car, have children. One might attribute this to a generational roadmap, and if deviated, frowned upon. It seemed only correct that we would follow the path required. The pressures of how we should tick the boxes of such marital success would be our demise.
So yeah, there we were. We bought the car, the house, and soon after we'd be expecting our first son. It was roughly 2012. We both had what seemed a stable income. Charina at the time pursuing a teaching degree and working in the field, gaining the required experience as a young junior, and I requiring experience in the young junior technician, building and gaining this experience in the mechanical engineering industry.
This for us was a turning point. Let's refer back to that rickety little boat, all together sailing right into the eye of the storm. I remember it was early in the morning. A delivery vehicle arrived with an envelope, a letter, stating I'd been let go. Based on my new responsibilities of motherhood, and that I was unfortunately no longer fit for the position. House, car payments, newborn baby, and now no job. Who would hire me now with a little baby to care for?
From there onwards, it became a downward spiral. We didn't know how to catch up on repayment, financial commitments, starting falling behind. We felt trapped as a couple, so alone and afraid. A young couple about to lose everything only a few years into this journey. And we did. First, we had to sell the house and move in with family. We barely had any belongings left as we had to sell everything. Next, I always joke and say, the car financing company came knocking on our door to help us back on our feet. Yes, they wanted their car back.
We felt like, oh no, this is story.
Oh, sorry, Martin. We felt like we failed at the world's idea of successful journey, and the storm and its crashing waves would feel like it would almost engulf us. At times, others would climb on the boat with us, help us row safely and provide hope and some comfort. Came 2016, I was given the opportunity to join my father-in-law and assist him with some of his contracts in the electrical construction industry while I was looking for better opportunities in the Cape. We felt that all the doors in Joburg just closed up for us. As a family, me and Charina prayed about it, and we took the leap of faith and moved to Cape Town into a flat on his property until we got back on our feet. This gave us a little bit more privacy, but unfortunately the unit wasn't fully constructed and we It was uncomfortable for the first while, but with new hope, we made the best of it till it was completed. A few months in, and I found a position at a very well-known door manufacturing factory, and the future started looking positive for us. Charina fell pregnant, and we eagerly awaited the birth of our second son, born 4 years later than our first, and we started to get back on our feet. That's what we had thought.
We were now going into the eye of the storm, or what we perceived as the eye of the storm. The storm and its raging waters seemed to be calming, not realizing that we were entering the center, and it would be a way to go before the true embrace of God's gentle waters. At 27 weeks gestation, my water broke. I spent 2 weeks in hospital as I'd fight to keep my son from being born too early. The day I turned 30 weeks, I had realized my son was no longer being fed by the umbilical cord, and the womb had been infected. They rushed me in for an emergency C-section. In their haste, the epidural did not take successfully. Any woman's nightmare. I'm not going to go into depth there. I tried to indicate to the doctors I'd feel my feet and I could move them, but they did not seem to be listening, as their top priority was to get my son out alive. This would be a traumatic experience for Francois and myself. My son would barely cry. He made almost no sound. Premature babies don't really cry, I would learn. He would just make little sounds. They took him out, and none of the usual where dads get to cut the umbilical cord and mom gets to pose with baby next to her. Instead, he was placed in a bag and taken away. I would only see him again a day later, with what seemed like hundreds of little pipes and needles all in one little body weighing 1.1 kilograms. The next morning, I got up out of hospital bed. Our medical aid would not cover a transfer to the hospital where Logan was transferred to. So if I wanted to see my son, we either had to pay out of pocket for an ambulance to drive me there ourselves to Blouberg Hospital from N1 City. And we unfortunately did not have those, obviously we couldn't afford that. So Francois laid the seats down, and I was driven to Blouberg to spend the remaining 4 days in another hospital to recover.
So this would be the start of a cold, lonely, and long 7 weeks in the NICU ward at Blouberg. It was clinical. We only had the opportunity to see him all piped and needled up for the first 2 weeks. Felt like 2 months. By the third week, we were allowed to touch him for the first time after he was born, and held him days 2 weeks later. I remember all I wanted to do was clothe him like you do with your newborn baby. This felt normal, but he couldn't wear clothes. He had a tiny nappy on and tubes and needles everywhere. The sister took our wedding bands, and it would fit over his hand, wrist, all the way to his elbow. My ring would all actually fit up to his shoulder. That's how small he was. He had very tiny dummy to aid him in the sucking reflexes. As days went by, we'd call and book in as often as we could, although I could not make it as often as I'd like to, as my work commitments kept me occupied. They contacted us to inform us that Logan wasn't doing well. He needed an urgent blood transfusion. But we had to sign this off, as it could have been fatal to his little body should the body reject or contract any infections. His body also did not make cortisol. He had a heart valve that needed attention as well and monitoring. We signed for the blood transfusion, but with bated breath. We were there when the machines were inserted for the transfusion. More needles going into a body that by now was a mere 950 grams, down from the initial 1.1. We got asked to leave soon after. We were told we'd be kept updated. Never felt time go by so slowly and agonizingly. What felt like forever, we finally got called back to him and told that all went well, that we will now see over the next few days how he takes it. More blood transfusion soon followed. A miracle, he was born to soon yet survive and fought to each milestone.
Coming home, it was exhausting. He had so many different medications I had to remember, and he would barely sleep at night because the lights of the NICU would be on during most nights for all the babies to be monitored. One of his medications had a Doppler, and the Doppler was loose or faulty. When I was required to administer it the next morning, the Doppler fell and the liquid content streamed out. Logan stopped breathing and started to go blue, and his body seemed stiff and lifeless. I needed to save my baby. I ran to the car. My step-mom heard me screaming for help. She jumped in the car alongside me and held him, trying to pat him to breathe as I drove as fast as I could. I drove to Panorama Mediclinic, which was the closest medical facility. I stopped anywhere I could at the hospital. I grabbed his little body and started to run. I ran to the nearest door through the cafeteria. The security saw me running and ran with me to show me the emergency room. As I turned the corner, I could feel my legs giving in, but I refused to stop running. I ran just past the emergency room manager, funnily enough, and my leg gave in. I held him close to my chest to protect him. As I fell on him, I thought I fell and he had passed. Sorry. Sure. Sorry. The security guard looked down at me and said he was still crying.
Okay, I'm going to talk as Charina. The security guard looked down at me and said, "He is crying." The fall actually knocked the wind or the fluid that he contracted earlier, and he began to crying, breathe. The fall saved his life. The security guard then grabbed him and carried on running on Charina's behalf. The practice manager picked her up from the fall and carried her to the emergency room where a team was around him. Sadly, the fall had broken his femur. He would be in a little contraption, transferred in from the Red Cross Children's Hospital for 3 months. It was actually looking quite funny, to be honest. This was a terrible accident, but God allowed what we believed was a miracle, the fall that saved him. He had not taken a breath for some time. The fall allowed him to take a breath and start crying. He would heal and be a sporty kid today, not affected by his accident. So this is my side. The waters would continue to crash the little boat. There were moments we believed we would drown. If attending to our newborn in ICU visit wasn't enough, a few months after he was obviously out of hospital, our oldest son had shared a tragic occurrence that had taken place at the hands of a family member. The darkness would overshadow on Good Friday 2018, and we would have to have another period of difficulty in the fight for our oldest son, only 5 years old at the time. In this situation, our safety as a family was compromised as an investigation would begin, and we had to find a new home during this time. Our lives were threatened, but we were determined to fight for justice, whatever it took.
Since moving to Cape Town, I had been working in a sales position. I was struggling to function at dealing with what had happened to our newborn and also what I had just learned about what had happened to my eldest son being only 5 years old. The eye of the storm would at times feel like it had engulfed us, and the little boat was drowning. Our youngest would grow and heal, but our oldest would go through a 3-year battle. What I would say is that one thing children teach us is God's ultimate lessons. My son taught us forgiveness. He had forgiven. Due to the legal system, it was recommended, as my son could not testify in court, as at the time he experienced a speech problem, that he would not be able to stand trial, and that we would need to return when he was older and more able. Unfortunately, we can't share exactly the contents of that. It's still ongoing. In the 3 years of a legal battle of our son's justice, I stopped going to the office, often crying in my car and unable to get out and start my day. I lost my ability to be around people, and after what had happened, I could no longer cope. I partly blamed myself. Now what was once the opportunity to move in a positive direction seemed far from possible. In time and during COVID, I would try offer online lessons to make extra money for us and create an equality platform called Unseen International to compete for change makers. This was a 2-year venture. Many times we did not have much, but God always provided through family and friends, which we are extremely grateful for. Struggling financially became often trying, and it would be easy to, on occasion, lose faith. It was hard. We would have many conversations with God, arguments and interactions, and what felt over our years in the wilderness. And then finally, the calm after the storms. Do you want to? Okay. In July 2021, a family member encouraged me to go into the solar industry and apply the knowledge I gained through online marketing and sales. At the time, I had no experience in the industry at all, nor did I have interest, and declined the offer at the time. Again, a family member approached me in November 2021, and at this point, I had prayed a significant prayer. I let go and I let God. We let God row the boat to its safety and most certainly calmer and more gentle waters. I stopped trying to fix everything that had broken, and I let God do the work.
So early in 2022, I took interest in the renewable sector and would join Charina, but this was on a part-time basis as I still had full-time employment. This was a very short part-time basis as my passion grew in the industry and so did hers. We absolutely loved it and the new challenges and the fast-growing technology associated with the renewable industry. In February 22, Lunar Solar was born and we started finding work in the industry. We would spend hours in the car attending site inspections and meeting potential clients. I, at the time, still working at a full-time job and part-time selling and getting work booked. In June 2022, after lots of prayers and asking God for a sign, the choice was made by myself and Charina for me to leave my full-time employment, a stable salary, and take up the challenge to become self-employed. I often told myself this, if God puts you to it, He will get you through it. In July 2022, our fully fledged team started installing full-time.
Although it felt as if we were sailing uncharted waters, it was a beautiful journey as God was at the helm of the boat and we were merely the passengers of His vessel. The beauty of God's sunrise over gentle waters, the brightness of the light reflecting off the crystal waters, reflections of trials of the storm that we have just been through can be seen, but the peace was overwhelming. We lived in a very small little 2-bedroom townhouse after we had now moved, with a single garage. That was what we could afford, and we had converted the garage into an office and a storeroom, which we worked from on a daily basis. This would become too small very quickly, and our admin staff could not barely fit in such a little room. We then obviously moved to an offices. We even hired a storage unit to store material. This would too become too small. Approximately 1 year later, we would successfully open our offices in February 2023. We now had ample space to accommodate everyone, trusting in God's provision. We kept taking leaps of faith and continually praying for God's wisdom, discernment, and guidance.
So 22 months later, we are currently standing at a staff of 21 strong, and we're about to celebrate our second birthday in May based on our official company registration. What an absolute blessing. What God allowed us to achieve while He is at the helm in 2022, by the end of the year, we were installing at approximately 15 installs or so a month. This is only 7 months of our existence. Load shedding certainly helped, but we are where we're competing with over 2,000 registered installers in South Africa. By January 2023, we sold 73 installs in that very month. We were installing 40 installs a month in 2023. In 22 months, as we said, we installed approximately 700 solar installations, predominantly in the Western Cape and small percentage in Gauteng. 1 month, we were clocked 60 installs. We're catching up during a busy month. We have had absolutely privileged to become master installers in our field and are on the top 5 installers in the residential sector based on buying power in South Africa for 2023. This was indicated by one of the biggest suppliers of the industry in South Africa. We have achieved as a team multiple milestones and are listed as a medium-sized business based on what we have achieved. We are and we're nothing special. We have and will do nothing spectacular. We just love the Lord and are so grateful that we get to be part of His amazing journey. We are grateful God allowed us to shine His glory through our lives. He is so much part of our business. He always sees how He is working. We do our best to trust in His provision. We have quiet months too, but we are constantly reminded that when God is at the helm, we can merely trust in His direction. We began our February 2024 quiet running out of installs in 5 days and contemplating decreasing installs. We were concerned we would run out of work. We ended up booking that month 4 weeks in advance and making more than what the target is required. We are so thankful that we experienced the storms because this strengthened us as a couple and prepared us for the uncharted waters and helped us appreciate the gentle moments and peacefulness of the calm. There will always be turbulence on life's waters. In 2022, my son, the eldest, began to experience headaches that were crippling. It would get worse by 2023. 5 lumbar punctures later, he was diagnosed with intracranial hypertension. This illness presented from the same system of a brain tumor. So it's like what you experience having brain tumors. They looked again and again, and at the end of last year, still no tumors could be found. Although the main danger of this illness is blindness, multiple ophthalmologists has indicated several times that his eyesight is perfect. He's on a journey of healing.
In everything we have been through, the little boat was never alone. We were never alone. Jesus sat with us in the boat and protected our family. He was always with us. If he wasn't with us, he was at the helm. You may be in the midst of a trial, and this is what we wanted to share with you today. You may be in the midst of a trial. You may be in the storm, sailing into the eye or on turbulent waters. You may be in the boat, or you may have found yourself alone in the dark shadows. Like Jonah swallowed by a fish in the depths, may you be encouraged by his prayer in Jonah chapter 2. Or perhaps you are experiencing God's calm, gentle waters in your life's journeys. I pray that you may feel God's presence and you may allow him to take over the helm of your life. Let go and let God. I often sat in church riddled with thoughts, arguments, and conversations with God whilst our pastors preached. If I saw myself in the crowd here at church today and I could go back in time 4 years ago, I would walk up to myself and whisper, Jesus is in the boat with you. It's going to be okay. Allow him to take the helm. As difficult as it will become, just remain faithful and embedded in God's grace because he is with you. He is working. Every day I must remind myself to allow God to be and remain at the helm of our little rickety boat. It is in our sinful nature to do life in our own strength. In closing,
the darker the trials, the more beautiful light shines through, the brighter God's glory.
Thank you very much.